Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Epic Encounters. I'm your host, Braylon, and this is my co-host, Matt.
Hey.
Alright, and today we have a interesting one, and one I've seen highly debated all across the internet. Today we have the Terran Marine from StarCraft versus the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines from 40K. I'll keep using Space Marine throughout the rest of the thing because if you're uninitiated, then you're uninitiated. Sorry.
You don't sound that sorry.
I'm not at all. I'd say if you're uninitiated, it's because you don't want to be. So today we're going to break down an encounter versus these two characters, or these two groups of characters. Analyze their weapons, armor, tactics, and skills, and give you a breakdown of the fight, how we see it going, and who we think overall would be the winner. Keep in mind, for all the people who might be offended with our end choice, doesn't matter, it's our show, we can have whatever idea we want.
And you're wrong.
Yeah, say and you're wrong. So, some basic rules for this. For the contest and the fight itself. Both sides have equal numbers of combatants. We decided it made more sense for us to have a 5v5, so a squad versus a squad, as we didn't want to go for the larger number because then that's a much longer debate to decide the different tactics of the squads and once they get to bigger numbers. And we didn't want to go with 1v1 because that doesn't really show how these two forces fight. If it was a named character versus a named character, it would be more of a, hey, let's talk about these each individual characters, and that would be a 1v1. But in this situation, squad v squad makes the most sense. It's what we decided would work best for this. Both people, or both squads, will have their standard loadouts. So for the Space Marine, that is the bolter, standard pattern bolter, the chainsword, bolt pistol, and the Mark IV power armor. And for the Terran Marine, that is the C-14 rifle, their slug thrower pistol, and the CMC 400 power armor, which I think is the most recent version of the ones that are not heavy armor, but
That sounds right.
Could be wrong, but I don't think there was major differences other than increased technical suite between the armors as they went further forward in different power systems, which in this fight I don't think that those are major things that we need to discuss.
Oh no, the other ones are just different models.
Well,
as far as Marines go.
I'm not even talking about the different model, like the Firebat and stuff. I'm just talking about the older versions of the standard armor. Yeah, so they're older.
Yeah, this is the modern.
Okay, so it's the modern one. That's what we're absolutely going with. So, I'm going to cover a few other things. Both sides will be fighting on neutral ground. We're assuming this is some sort of outpost. The narrative behind this is that the Space Marines make communication for what they think is a Terran force, because Terra is still Earth in 40K, but seeing the different banners and different ship design and so on, and someone saying they're from Terra, immediately brings hostilities from them, and Space Marines are war-loving, so diplomacy isn't something they do. They're very, we don't negotiate with terrorists kind of way of going about things, so we're gonna roll with that. So with that being said, Matt, would you like to open up, or you want me to open up with characters? I can talk forever with the Warhammer stuff, but
I'll have you open up first.
Want me to open up?
Yep.
All right. So the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. These are the premier shock troops of the Imperium of Man. They they work as small strike forces being made by the Emperor of Mankind to be the definitive drop on a planet and destroy anything that moves and fights against you. They primarily work with shock and awe tactics, and there's a lot of things that go along with them, but when you think Space Marine or, you know, your generic future super soldier, these are up there at the pinnacle of that for that idea. Some basic information about them. So Space Marines are about 8 foot tall in armor. And outside of their armor, there's still these slab-muscled humans that stand about 7 feet tall and some inches. Outside of their armor, they're about 600-ish pounds. Or around like 250 kilo if you're going with that type of measurements. If you're not in freedom units, they can lift around 3 to 5 tons in armor and roughly about half that outside of the armor. Though the upper limits of that varies from Space Marine to Space Marine. And generally speaking, between the different types of Space Marines, because they all work in small chapters or strike forces, there's a lot of difference between their tactics, the way they fight, their weapons of choice primarily, but most Space Marines use the bolter, they use the Mark IV Maximus power armor, they carry some sort of melee weapon with them, whether that be a chainsword or just a knife. And generally speaking, they are very militaristic as a group overall. I think there's more I can get into, but I think that covers the introduction of like what a Space Marine is. Matt, would you like to go ahead and introduce the Terran Marine? Give us a little bit of information on them and kind of break down what or who they
are. Yes. 1 minute. So, Terran Marines also originated from Terra. They split into 3 colonies. This is a little bit of history more than anything. Split into 3 colonies. I believe those 3 colonies ended up warring over each other. Terra, Earth did remain, but they don't do anything with that. Yeah, so predominantly you're looking at, what is the faction called again? Sorry, I was not as prepared as you were.
Oh, perfectly fine.
Yeah, Terran Dominion. That's what I remember.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, they're
the faction that shows up the most.
They primarily work for the Terran Federation for that.
Yeah. Anyways, they're also extremely militaristic. Mostly farmers and prisoners is weirdly their strike force, but they do actually have soldiers as well. In most cases, they're just pretty regular people, but all have some degree of training, considering they're all in various different suits and stuff. Their C-14 rifle.
We won't get into the weapons too much right this moment. We'll step back into the weapons just a little bit. We just want to go into want to get the contestants down, and then we can absolutely go into the weapons right after that.
Okay.
Yep, I don't want to bog the early part down too much with too much beyond just the information on what the faction is, what they commonly have, what they do.
Okay. All right, then. Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right, we can immediately get into the primary weapons of each force, because these are kind of going to decide who wins and how they win. So for the Space Marines, their primary ranged weapon is the bolter. To put it simply, the bolter functions similar to if you were to give it a modern day comparison, a grenade launcher, a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. But let's see, and that's basically what a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. If you stuck a rocket technology in the back of it and made the charge inside of it a micro-sized RPG.
Lovely.
So the weapon itself functions like a rapid firing RPG. If you took one of a video game where you can get unlimited rocket launchers and you can just shoot over and over, that's a bolter. It fires a shell that flies out at you, rockets towards you, gets faster as it goes at hypersonic speeds, and it hits. One charge pushes out an explosive to crack through something. Second charge shoots the actual depleted uranium spear into you, and then it explodes. It's basically a dual stage rocket, very much like an RPG, but micro size to be a functioning grenade launcher. The weapon carries roughly about, I think it's between 20 to 32 rounds for your standard magazine, and Space Marines carry about an additional 8 on them. For effective range, I know that at full auto, the effective range is similar to that of modern day assault rifles. But, of course, with improved optics and targeting systems, they're hitting accurately with small groupings at the maximum distances for modern-day rifles when they're going full auto. And when they're firing single shot or semi-automatic, single shot or burst fire, they're getting more consistent ranges similar to that of, not exactly sniper rifles, but similar. With a max rounds per minute of like 2,000 if they're trying to dump, if they're just magazine dumping, adjusting the flipper switches and just blasting.
Just put them to sleep with the blanket of lead.
Yeah, let's say with the blanket of lead. And you don't want anything to be there. You don't want holes left. You just want ash and dust by the time it's done. While the weapon itself has various different ammunition types, special ammunition types, the weapon is effective against lightly armored targets, normally blowing regular humans in, say, ceramic armor or bulletproof armor, or carapace armor is what's common in Warhammer, to pieces on a single blow. And with light-focused fire from a Space Marine or a squad of Space Marines, these can be used against armored transports to crack them open, some medium tanks, and it's actually effective against Space Marines, but there's some information to go in about that. For like technical information, I don't think it's really important until we get to any debate on whether we think each one weapon is better than the other, but I think that covers the bolter for the most part.
Okay.
C14.
Yeah. On my side, we got C14, hypersonic 8mm armor-piercing spikes. These things are fun, actually. This is predominantly what I've been reading over. But yeah, so it's Gauss assisted. It does still use like traditional firing methods, gunpowder, to get it going. It has a magnetic accelerator pack within the gun, to send 8mm spikes hypersonic. It's pretty awesome. It's 30 rounds per minute. And then this is the thing I'm confused about.
I think it might be 30 rounds per second.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
It is per second. But it carries 500 rounds per magazine?
I think I missed that shit. The fuck?
Yeah. So, that's the primary on my side.
Well, forget what I said about the Space Marine mag dump.
Yeah, literally, the blanket of lead is coming from my end. However, we have a sidearm, which I regretfully will inform everyone that is practically an 8mm modern pistol. It's not really worth mentioning. It's even stated in its own canon that it's more. It's like swords in like England, right? Like it's just a knighting ceremony. And then we do have bayonets, but I don't have a whole lot of information as far as like knives go. So I would just
if it's a standard just stabby bayonet, it's it ain't doing a lot here.
I agree. I will, however, say that I do think the bayonet is more useful than the sidearm.
I think as we were discussing before we even got into this, I still think the sidearm is more useful as a bludgeon than it is as an actual weapon to shoot in this fight.
Yeah. May as well be a Fitzpatrick.
I think one of the things that, for comparison for the two weapons, because I know we're going to come to it a little bit later, but I do want to give a rough comparison for anyone who here's the 8mm part of the weapon for the Terran Marine and thinks, oh, it's just like a 9mm pistol. No, it's more akin to the rounds used for anti-tank rifles. It would be a jacket discarding or self-enclosed sabot round, which means that there's a round with traditional percussion in it, shoots the round forward, flies out, and that armor-piercing depleted uranium needle just stabs into whatever it is, and it hits like an autocannon, like your modern day, like the Bushmaster on a Bradley fighting vehicle, for people who have that, or your kind of like your 50 high rate of fire 50 cal machine gun.
Yeah,
I think.
I do have one other thing.
Is a bit bigger and heavier than. Go for it.
The other thing I do have in my back pocket, kind of unrelated, is I do have stim packs. We didn't really talk about space drugs too much.
We didn't talk about space drugs too much, and I think that comes in when we talk about like X Factor stuff.
That's fair.
Or even if it comes in with the armor, because I think the stim packs are in the armor.
You are correct. Yes.
Since you did talk about the other weapons for the Terran Marine, since you talked about the sidearm, you even mentioned the stim packs, I would like to mention that the Space Marines do have a sidearm, significantly more impressive than the bolt thrower. That is, I say both of them are bolt throwers. It's just that, or yours is a slug thrower, theirs is a bolt thrower. But the Space Marine bolt pistol is like
that is a lawnmower.
All right, I'll cut that out in post. The Space Marine bolt pistol is basically a sized down version of their main weapon. It carries similar types of rounds, same type of charge for them. And the only real difference is smaller caliber, normally shorter ranged, and it is not their go-to, but it is what they tend to switch to when they get into close range, or they're using their melee weapon. Though some of them will use their main bolt gun or bolter as their kind of like a sidearm if they need to, if they're in close combat. So they'll use the chainsword. And the chainsword is the other thing that I was going to get into. The chainsword, very impractical, kind of ridiculous, having a chainsaw as a sword. But to put it practically, it is a chainsaw as a sword with adamantium teeth, not the same kind as like Marvel's adamantium, but super hard fictional metal that has similar strength to something like tungsten titanium, but slightly harder, and it's a composite metal. And basically what they use it for is normally against unarmored targets, but against armored targets, they may use it to saw into heavy armor plates and try to chop a man in half through the armor.
Ugh.
I would say that this is... I want to say it matters for the close combat, but I think as soon as we get to more of the physical strength parts and discussing that, I don't think it will matter as much.
Every lumberjack's dream, a chainsaw sword with adamantine teeth.
Just running around. Must chop wood!
Oh, man.
I think, what was it? Man-at-Arms did this is a tangent. I know it's a tangent. But Man-at-Arms did a chainsword, and I think they made it to Space Marine size. And it was super unwieldy. It's like taller. It's over half the height of the person wielding it. They're like trying to swing it around, and they gotta like brace it with two arms. It's absolutely ridiculous to watch someone swing it, but then when you look at it for scale, it's like, yeah, I guess that would be about right for them. Ridiculous as fuck as it is, but would be about right.
I'm looking for it right now.
I absolutely think that after you should watch it.
Okay, I found it. Alright, I'm ready.
I guess the next thing to do is to break down the close combat, and this is, since we just talked about the weapons, we can go back into the weapon comparison in a bit, because of course we'll have the full-on discussion here.
Actually, before the tangent ends, since we're probably still going to cut this part out anyways,
you have... probably leave the tangent in, but go ahead.
That's fair. You have, like, broken out audibly for, like, 3 seconds 3 times now?
I wonder why that is.
It shows in call, but I don't know if that has ever, because I kind of remember it happening on Riverside last time, but I'm wondering if you know if that actually goes through on your end or not.
I'm not sure if it's going through on my end. It may just be my lows that are just too low for you to hear when they're going through. It could.
What happened in the middle of you talking about the pistol, the sidearm?
If it's missing, it's not super important that the pistol is missing.
Okay. The other two I don't remember. I just remember I thought like I should probably keep track of that exact point, because if it shows up on your end, that would be your way of telling.
Yeah, if it shows up on my end while I'm going through the audio, I will either re-record the small part that got missing, or I'll add it in post and just cover parts that I missed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm ready.
I don't worry too much about it. So yes, moving on to close combat, and I'll let you go first on this matter, only because I think for your side it may not matter as much. But for the
I
Space
agree.
Marines, it's a bit more important.
So you're the one who found like the calculations or did the calculations. I forget.
Yeah,
No, you double check someone else's.
Yeah.
Either way, what was it that my guys could like deadlift? Because it was the jukebox.
Yeah, there's the jukebox that you see in some of the cinematics. There's also some showings with I don't remember which one of the named characters it was that like shoulder checks another Marine and basically folds him up with just a single charge. I think the estimate that I had, and from what I've seen, because it's a little bit inconsistent as far as it goes, because it's not super common that they're using melee. They're not running up and punching people, but I think the most that I've seen, or to take a conservative estimate, was around 1,000 pounds to about a ton is the most that I've seen actively moved in power armor by the Marines.
Okay.
Outside of the armor itself.
So that is one benefit. Another benefit, which I don't think matters, but we'll mention it, is it does have like thermal. Oh man, I need to pull that up. But it has like thermal resistors or something to make it not like try to make it invisible to infrared.
I'd say that would be very useful for the stealth part.
Yeah.
Let's say if they were to try to hide and run ambushes on the others and hide from scanners, I would say that would be effective.
Oh man, I need to know what it's called. I need the details. This is what I get for focusing on the gun.
We can always come back to that, because we are gonna do the armor breakdown after this, but this is just close combat. There's skills in it, how they use it in combat.
Okay, yeah. Either way, they do have like some stealthing. It doesn't actually stealth, but for thermal, they did invest in trying to make it kind of quiet when you walk around as well. So like it's not as loud as you'd think it would be. Although, still note, it is pretty loud and obvious and clunky. Just not what you would expect for that. It's not like a factory. But on top of that, no, honestly, I think that's about it. I think that is all that's really worth adding for like close combat breakdowns.
Okay. So Space Marines in particular, and 40k as a major thing, close combat is big. Most Space Marines either come from feral worlds. These are like these basically jungles where they still have very tribal cultures. So warrior rights and warrior cultures are a common place that Space Marines are recruited from. And then this is culminated further by their induction to the Space Marines. And if they come from less feral worlds or not from gangers or things like that, they tend to come from... They regardless of where they come from, Space Marines are trained hard in multiple disciplines. And because they function as basically a monastic warrior order, all they do is fight, train, and live with their brothers. So Space Marines actively live, sleep, and eat combat. So when they get close to each other, they fight. They know how to fight. If we're going with the Ultramarines, which I think is what I'm using for this because they're the poster boys of 40k, Ultramarines in particular, they focus on some of the old Grecian martial arts, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu kind of things, which is shown a lot in the Horus Heresy era, where those things pop up more often. And sword play and various weapon mastery is pretty much mandatory. So most Space Marines know how to knife fight, they know how to use a sword effectively. While the skill isn't universal across all of them, generally speaking, if you compare a Space Marine to your average person or even a trained combatant with a sword, most Space Marines outmatch them significantly. For close combat, the other major thing is that, and this is why I was mentioning that I don't think the chainsword matters as much. The physical strength difference here is
It's pretty rough.
Yeah, I'll say it's rough. Space Marines out of armor likely match a Terran in armor because they're augmented significantly. They have fiber bundle muscles that are made out of synthetic materials under their skin. They have enhanced bone structure. They've got, I mean, they're massive. They're like 7 feet. They're as tall as the Terran is in armor, out of armor.
It's also why there's not a whole lot to talk about as far as close combat.
There's a lot to talk about on one end, but not on both. I don't know if there's a lot more to say on that matter. It's just that the Space Marines max amount in armor is anywhere between 2 to 5 tons. They can physically lift a car off of someone with one hand. They toss around regular human beings with no effort at all. When they need to get to someone or they need to get through a wall or a door that's made out of anything lighter than like heavy gauge steel, they just punch through it. Say even armored human targets, Space Marines may bludgeon them to death with their bare fist or with their weapon rather than even resorting to a sidearm or a sword. Just on that, while we don't have too much to say on the physical characteristics from the Terran other than the stuff we went over, I think the Space Marine kind of he owns all the real estate on the close combat market.
I could only imagine like a cannibal Space Marine like opening up other people's suits like pieces of candy.
What if I eat people?
I would believe you. I would absolutely believe you in Warhammer universe.
They absolutely do eat people.
That's insane. Like a Snickers bar, just cracking open a Space Marine that gets close.
It's like, I really need some information from this guy, so let me just punch my hand through his helmet and rip out his brains and take a bite. You know, I think I put this episode as... Oh, smack my mic. I think I put this episode as not graphic content.
Maybe we cut that part out then.
I think that part just kind of killed that, but we'll see in the long run. Let's move on to the armor breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll let you lead off with this one. I don't know how much you want to say about it, but I know I got a fair bit to say about Space Marine armor, but not too much.
Actually, I would like to read over this first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, to keep it sort of brief for Space Marines, and sort of brief is I feel like that's an understatement in this situation, but to keep it sort of brief on Space Marine power armor. Space Marine power armor is full body suit. It covers them from head to toe in all parts. And for the bulk of the armor, it's made up of this very bulky looking setup. It has the chest plate, very large pauldrons that are particularly made for them to deflect blows, a large chest plate center, and then articulated joints between each one of where a human joint would match up with. Alongside this, Space Marines they have a large sensor array where their weapon is linked up to their armor. And it gives them data feedback. They get live HUD displays over other allies in power armor. It gives them data with other units. They quickly process that information. And due to their augmented nature and the way the armor is set up, a lot of the Space Marines' senses that they're already augmented are enhanced by the armor. So, for instance, their helmet gives them basically a large array of different vision settings. So from thermal to X-ray to night vision to sonic readouts if they need it. They can, and it even gives intricate weapon ballistics both for themselves when they're firing, so they can calculate their shots, or to even calculate where fire is coming from the enemy once they've been shot at. A couple of other things is that Space Marines have very acute senses, similar to their hearing. They can block out noises, amplify noises in their head via either their actual ears, and this is augmented by the armor that can amplify sounds or focus in on sounds. They have senses from their nose akin to that of a dog, and then their armor can let them analyze those substances after they bring them in through their air filtration systems. So if a Space Marine was hunting you, they could hunt you down like a bloodhound if they had got your scent. Or, you know, as we just mentioned, eat someone. Because, you know, that's
crack open a cold one with the squad.
Crack open a cold one. It just happens to be the person you're fighting.
I guess at this point it would be crack open a warm one.
Yeah, I guess if they're warm, they're not even one. They're not cold ones or warm ones. They're just ones. So they do have a deep setup with their armor. Not to go too deeply into all the other systems, because I can go on for days about just basic systems that are included with the armor. But I think it's good to go over the idea of what sort of stuff their armor is protective over, to give a general idea of how their armor works. So most power armor is tough. It's normally good against light weapon fire, and then your heavier weapons can actually damage it. Especially when you get to like medium level weapons, like say you're looking at Halo, something like a chain gun actually can punch through Master Chief's shields and possibly punch through his armor. Space Marines, for all that bulk and size, have a lot more going for them. Space Marine armor is more like that of, say, a T-34 tank or a Tiger tank. It's closer to, in the chest plate and the shoulder plates, 100 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. So, for instance, if you were shooting at like a not the Bradley sucks because it's too easy to penetrate. But similar to not a mainline battle tank, but a secondary or smaller fighting vehicle, maybe a little bit bigger than the Bradley. That would be what you're getting from a Space Marine's armor. Specifically, the chest plate and the shoulder pads are going to be the ones that take the big hits. Like, Space Marine shoulder pads are meant to take things like auto cannons directly to the shoulders or to the chest plate. However, of course, armor's thinner on the helmets. It's really weak at the joints because that's more like Kevlar than anything else. I think that covers most of the stuff for the armor, except for the fact that, that it does slightly increase their physical stats that we've already talked about with the strength. And additionally, even their speed in their armor basically allows them to exert themselves for much, much longer at lower effort. So like 60 mile per hour full sprints, or a 30 to 40 mile per hour like regular jogging pace. I think that's it for anything related to the Space Marines armor without getting too in depth. This isn't a breakdown video.
Okay. So on my end, we got CMC 300 powered combat seats. Well, aside from, I already forgot what was the weight that they could lift again.
I think we settled.
It was like 600. A ton.
I thought we were settling around a ton because I would say that if you can lift the object that we were discussing, the jukebox, 600 pounds over your head, you can probably lift significantly more than just that. Because for the things that I saw, the jukebox and then a couple other physical
Yeah,
things,
sounds fair.
like even the bum rushing a guy and shoulder carrying him into a wall who's also in the same power armor. I mean, that means you can at least lift the other 800-pound guy and slam him into the wall on a run. So you can probably lift, I'd say, a ton, maybe a little more.
Yeah. No, I agree. Okay, so the suit is powered by cold fusion, which these cartridges are entered into the chest. It's very like Tony Stark-like. There are 2 turbines on the back that just exhaust ports, really. Alright, so the things it comes with is pretty much shielding against like UV rays and stuff like that, and help them colonize other planets. The suit is like all-purpose, generally. Aural directional... I'm just going to read this list. Aural directional enhancers, which essentially is just hearing aids. Full life support and gravity generation, just so you can like walk on an asteroid or if you're doing something in space. Some energy energy. Oh no, enhanced. Thank you. I was wondering what I was doing this. I'm reading 2 different lines. Enhanced protection. Let's see. The HUD comes with a navigation mode which superimposes images and terrain, pinpointing prominent features. Although I think that requires a science vessel.
We can assume that if they're operating on this planet, that to some degree they have
some other presence.
Yeah, so you'd have some aerial support for both sides because I mean they had to get there.
Yeah. The other thing is it also comes with a targeting system, the navigation mode, and infrared vision. It does have a blast-resistant visor. It could technically survive. It could technically survive a nuke or a nuclear explosion. I think that actually is canon. I will have to look that up, so don't count that.
I was saying, yeah, the visor can survive it, but the rest of the body wouldn't be there. My visor made it. The rest of me is irradiated and gone, but my visor, my helmet, is here.
Oh, there it is. Mufflers. If the suit comes with mufflers, it will reduce the amount of noise the suit makes and the user's heat signature.
Okay.
You can get shoulder-mounted lights. And that's it. Oh, resupply unit for stim packs, liquid cooling systems. But I would count that in with like life support.
Go ahead and talk about the stim packs. This is something that I guess it matters for the argument of it. Let's talk about the stim packs. I'm sure if someone's watching it or they're used to StarCraft, they're going to be like, "What about the stim packs?"
Yes, the problem. Okay, so in-game, it's worth noting that there are differences for lore and in-game. In-game, it increases pretty much just humanoid units, or like Marines, whatever, infantry units. It increases their attack speed by 50%, and I think their movement speed by 50%. But you can also upgrade it. Oh no, you can't upgrade it. Yeah, it is 50% for attack speed and movement speed. But you also lose like 10 health, and I think they have 50 if I remember, or something like that. Like you can use it like 4 times and they just die on the 5th.
Okay, but in the reality sense, it's space drugs.
It is space drugs, yes.
It's shooting yourself up with stimulants, combat stimulants, to get yourself moving and doing more.
Here's the side effects. Drastic cellular degradation, addiction, weight loss, and hemorrhaging.
I'm sorry. One of those is One of those is kind of detrimental to winning this fight. So they can get a increased reaction speed, increased like physical movement. Of course, because if you get a big adrenal dump, that's chemically stimulated. It's like taking PCP. They're going to get a lot out of it with a cost.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I would say that it's just like your typical peak human drug for like 5 seconds. And in game, I would say also that it really does only last, like, I think 3 seconds. Is it 5? It might be 5. It doesn't say the timer.
We can give a conservative estimate on the idea that if it's meant for combat, it's probably going to last as long as an engagement. So anywhere from probably, in reality, anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour.
The problem is it doesn't really tell you any information as far as lore goes on stim packs. Like, what I read you is like pretty much all I found.
And I know there isn't really a lot for the stim pack. I know like their medical support, the life support stuff, like certain parts can close off to stop people from bleeding out and other effects. I know they have like emergency medical stuff and sealants inside of there, and the stim packs are. Ooh, I peeked there. The stim packs, from what I've seen, are essentially they're essentially just suit injected adrenaline. Could be wrong on that.
It's kind of what it seems like.
But from what I saw, suit injected adrenaline, it'll help. It'll help a lot. For if you just need that quick boost, and it may help them better compete with a Marine in a short engagement. I just don't know how. Of course, we'll come back to it, and we'll talk about how much of an X factor that is when we get there. Anything else on the armor before we move on?
Yes, the 50% attack speed increase should not apply to the gun, as the gun's mechanical capabilities.
Isn't going to be increased by your drug use. It would probably just be reaction speed.
Red makes you faster.
Yeah, they're orcs.
Drugs makes you faster.
I was going to say, but the problem is those drugs are going to be coming out of the red is going to be coming out of different places from that hemorrhaging. It won't be coming. It won't be on your gun unless you explode. All right.
No.
Let's discuss the two groups' tactics, because I don't know a huge amount about the Terran Marines' tactics, other than that I've seen them stand around and shoot a lot.
That's fair. You kind of have to run over like the starting mission cinematics, I guess, which isn't really even covered in cinematics. You kind of have to watch like gameplay, because it's only like the start, and as you progress the mission in each game that you hear them like actually talk about their plans and stuff.
Because I've seen the comic stuff and some of the novels, but even though I'd say they're written okay, the tactics are kind of ignored for cinematic glory in the books, and it talks more about the interpersonal stuff for people and not the actual battlefield tactics. Like, it explains the horrors of it and how the Zerg do things, but it doesn't explain anything about how the Terran Marines actually commonly fight, other than like drop pod assault, which is very similar to Space Marine tactics of drop pod assault.
Yeah, that's kind of it. It's kind of just very fast guerrilla warfare, shock and awe strategies, it seems like.
Okay, so
predominantly what Terran does. It's difficult to say more, because you do have a lot of like fortification type buildings. Almost everything in game is meant to pretty much colonize immediately. It seems like that is the design of Terrans, is colonization. Almost every bit of their buildings lifts off and lands somewhere else.
Which I would say the colonization thing, Space Marines are very similar. I think it's just a difference in scale, as Terrans tend to drop on a planet and immediately start building fortresses and they bring a massive force, while Space Marines will colonize a planet and they bring a strike force. They bring like 100 Marines.
Yeah. But it's difficult, though, because, like, the Terrans that are bad guys in the game, you don't get to play as them, so you're never really, like, fortified down. Well, I mean, you can fortify down, right? But you're never going to beat the mission that way. But it seems like when you're attacking, it's very guerrilla warfare. You can do it different ways, but, I mean, hit and run kind of is the most HP effective in terms of... It's hard to say. I would say guerrilla warfare. And then, aside from that, I would say it's very fortify a position and stick with it.
And then that shows in the cinematics, specifically when they're fighting. Cinematics, and then even in a lot of the comic book stuff where they're kind of setting down in a place and fighting against a swarm, or they're running through and trying to use guerrilla tactics, which they can't. I would say primarily they can't really use guerrilla tactics against the Zerg because of the mass, but they do seem to employ them. I think that I don't know what I would call them, separatist forces, primarily from what I saw, are more we're going to employ guerrilla tactics against you because you have the might of a larger army against us.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds right.
And for Space Marines, of course, we already discussed that both of them use the whole drop pod assault. We drop down, we hop out, and we start firing at you, specifically directly in your enemy lines. And then the other way that Space Marines tend to do it, especially the Ultramarines, is kind of a tactics as the battle requires. So they switch tactics quite often, which is their whole doctrine of, practicals versus theoreticals. They pop in and out of different ideologies and battle tactics, which is normally exemplified by the three main ones that are talked about, and they're represented on the tabletop. They're represented in stories. It's the Devastator Doctrine, which is their long range, hit you really hard and then move in. So bombard you with heavy weapons and then move in. Their Assault Doctrine, which is their close quarters, building to building style fighting, where they will employ guerrilla tactics. Or their Tactical Doctrine, which is the slow methodical grind, surgical strikes against various units, or against headquarters, and distraction in that matter. So Space Marines kind of employ a bunch of different tactics, because I would say this is one of the major differences between Space Marines and Terrans, is that your average Terran is not themselves a tactician.
I'd agree.
Whereas Space Marines primarily operate very independently. So Space Marines may drop down in a squad of 5, and then you operate with your squad of 5. And there may be 10 other operations of squads of 5 going around. But each of you is operating independently from each other, and you don't need to combine forces. That's kind of how they work as small elite teams, similar to, let's say Navy SEALs when they're deployed on an operation. Independent surgical teams used to destabilize and attack an enemy.
Yeah.
I think that, and in this one, I feel like the mix of tactics is pretty much going to be who's guerrilla tactics / who's going to have better guerrilla tactics and who's going to be more flexible as they're fighting in this small force, because whoever has that first is going to be is going to be the victor overall, because we've compared weapons, and tactics is going to be, while it's part of it, and Space Marines have more experience, I don't think it's going to be end-all, be-all, because it's still going to be a firefight in the end. And I don't want to go into experience too much. I think we kind of covered that. Your Terran is generally, they might be trained, but they're normally not career soldiers. They do have some, but most of them are voluntold that they're going to be Space Marines, or they're going to be, they're Space Marines of their own world. But they're voluntold, hey, you're going to be a soldier. What if I don't want to? This is conscription. You don't have a choice.
Yep.
I think we can go ahead and move into X Factor and then kind of talk about how we see this going and anything we see important. So, X Factor for the Terran Marines.
X Factor for Terrans is just the stim pack, which we briefly talked about before. I think it emphasizes their strength, which I think their gun is pretty much their strength. I think positioning with that is a little scary. I think having multiple blankets of lead coming in your direction is not ideal. It doesn't make that lead come faster. We did talk about that. But 30 rounds a second's pretty fucking nuts.
Yeah, I mean, at hypersonic speeds where it's going over 1,500 meters per second, it's a very fast weapon once fired, and it lays down a lot of shots. Don't get me wrong, they can empty their entire mag in half a minute, less than
I'm not mathing up to 500 by 30. I'm good, thanks.
I gotta generate. It's about 20 seconds to empty their whole mag.
That's a long fire time.
Yes, I would say, generally speaking, that is a lot of shooting for that is a long fire time, and it shows. Say, if you see any cinematic or any of the stories, they do everything in bursts of fire. Controlled bursts of just mowing down things, especially Zerg. They just pour fire into a target. Which I will say that is one of their X factors for this, is that they do focus on the whole focus down a single target with a withering hail of bullets. And while I think Space Marine armor is tough, I do think a full salvo, full auto is not something that a Space Marine can just shrug off.
Your X Factor?
For this, I would say Space Marine's X Factor is even without the armor, they are physically superior by a long ways.
Yeah.
And additionally, though I didn't want to talk about experience as just by itself, Space Marines are career soldiers that have done this for... Your average Space Marine has over 50 years of active experience. And most of the stuff that's offered by, say, like the armor of a Terran, like, say, the hearing boost, the sound dampening, any of the sensors, the HUD, all that different... Most of that stuff Space Marines have without the armor, like the being able to fight under any sun because it has light reflecting. Space Marine's skin just darkens and adds more melanin to the point where they can survive under nearly any sun. They literally go from... I mean, at least it doesn't sound as bad from me since I'm black, but they literally will go from being pale to black. Because it was convenient for the planet. Their body just changes. It's like, hey, this is what works. But yet, the physical differences are pretty big. I say a Terran in armor is about 300 to 400 pounds lighter than a Space Marine in armor. So even if, say, a Terran wanted to vibe check a Space Marine, you can't do that while being 400 pounds lighter.
It's not that it's not feasible. It's definitely doable, but like...
So you can absolutely run up and try to vibe check him, but you might get backhanded like a toddler.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Like, what is it? Wrestle him?
You gotta wrestle the guy that's a foot taller than you and 400 pounds heavier.
And then you realize when he bear hugs you, you just crinkle like a beer can. You're like, wait a minute.
It's like, wait a minute. And all you hear is, oh yeah, brother. I'm the cream of the crop. And then you get the Tista bomb.
Oh, man.
Oh, shit. Where's, like, Taylor right now? That feels like something he would say.
That's some, yeah, Taylor would say that. That's some Josh stuff.
That is more Josh than Taylor, but I absolutely think that both of them would immediately say some things like that. But that's kind of the X factor, the physicality if the fights are in close, and even the difference between the two weapons' functionality in close. A railgun needs time to travel. A grenade launcher is going to be effective whether I shoot you across a long road or in a hallway. Of course, I would say that, yeah, they do. The railgun will still have effectiveness even up close, but their benefit is the rate of fire and distance they can engage at. While being up close with a Space Marine, especially when their reaction time is faster than yours, kind of puts you in a bad spot. Because say they can't react to the bullets, and I'm going to assume that, yeah, those bullets are too fast for them to react to. Especially if they don't know where it's coming from. But in a hallway where they can see where you're aiming your gun before you're aiming it, darting back and forth across the room at like 60 miles an hour it's not something you're going to be able to react to in time before their fist is in your colon. I don't have a better way to put that. That's kind of the X factor is just the major difference in physicality. I do think that the Terran weapon gives them a good chance. But, I mean, we can go right into the breakdown here on this part and kind of where we're at for the who would win. And you can disagree with me on it, or you can give me what you think on it. But my thought process is the Terran Marine can hurt the Space Marine with its gun. But the Space Marine can hurt the Terran Marine with anything in this fight. I say their gun is an RPG that fires that it's an assault rifle RPG. and if it comes up to a physical fight, one is getting beaten up and their lunch money taken if they have to start throwing hands.
No, I'm just about in full agreement, honestly. I don't think there is... I will not say that, like, Terrans have 100% loss rate here, but...
I would say... Go ahead.
I think if it ever comes close, like, to close combat specifically, I pretty much entirely agree. I do think that, like, the weapons, it comes down more to who starts firing first, because, like, once you get suppressed, right, I feel like a lot of the fighting is probably done there. So I feel like strategy is pretty important as well.
Yes. I would say if this were a wide open area where both are just throwing shells at each other at long distance, like, just we're in an open field and we're just shooting shots at each other. The Terran Marines would take it probably 7 times out of 10 because they just have way more ability to apply heavy firepower at range and continuously. Especially
and I don't think they have a desire to get close.
No,
at all.
Absolutely not. But as soon as you take this to like the average battlefield, an urban environment, much like the Terrans struggling with just the Zerg smashing through walls and grabbing them and attacking them and getting too close, because, I mean, they do poorly up close. 3 Zerg jumping on a Terran means that you lost a Terran.
They do. It's kind of funny, too, because you think about it, and it's like, as far as like the StarCraft universe is concerned, aside from other humans, everything else is just running at you.
Yeah, and I would say that's the benefit of if the Space Marines do go with the whole I'm just gonna dart at you and see what happens. Don't get me wrong, they are faster than most things, other than Protoss, who just teleport. But you can kind of use the Protoss as a stronger version of your standard Space Marine and think, if I'm going, just take the 60 miles per hour sprint. If I'm going 60 miles per hour down a long road, less than a mile, you've got 1 minute to react to me. If I'm going a full mile. If I'm going half a mile, you have 30 seconds. If I'm going half of that, you have 20 seconds. Or, yeah, you have 15 seconds. And anything shorter than that, you have 5. You have 5 to react, put me down before you get butchered. While also having to worry about the fact that their weapon shooting at you while they can shoot and fire on the move. I don't think that it works the same. Like, the Terrans don't run at things and shoot their rifle, and they really can't because it's not as accurate on the move. But the Space Marine will, and does, fire their bolter while running full headlong at someone.
The other thing is it's funny to think about, because like all I can think about is the old Space Marine Warhammer 40k game, and what I think that came out a little bit before Gears of War did. But I just remember that they're like, we didn't want like you to take cover or anything because you're a fucking Space Marine.
It doesn't. There's not. It's like there's no cover here for you because we don't do fucking cover. Tuck your shoulder and run into it.
Oh man, like, yeah, you're literally getting run down by a tank. It's
you're getting run down, and in a 5v5, you're getting run down by 5 tanks. Take them all out before any of them gets to you. And I think that's. I would say in a 5v, if it's a straight firefight, I would say Terrans take about 3 of them down before they start getting really beaten down and probably killed. But in a tactical fight where they're going from building to building, there's lots of close range engagements. I say maybe 1. I'd say they take 20%. They take, if we were to do it 100 times, 100 times, I would say they take 20%.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
If the Space Marines are just keeping standard loadout, and I think that's the major thing, is that while a Terran Marine, when they start switching loadouts, tends to be various suits and different units altogether, a Space Marine carrying a different weapon is just a Space Marine carrying a different weapon. Like, we're not talking about plasma guns, not their rocket launchers that are basically a javelin in the modern day, but faster shooting. No melta guns where there's no armor comparison. It's just one guy gets shot and he's gone. Or the heavy bolter, which would be more in line to be basically a tank cannon being shot from one guy. It would literally be like a naval gun. A guy standing there with a naval gun shooting at you.
Have you ever fired a Desert Eagle?
Yep, it's fun.
Yeah. I got messed up from that. I just remember my wrist hurt for like 2 weeks. It probably wasn't that long. It was probably only a couple of days, but I remember that. Yeah. The first time I ever fired a gun, I did hit myself in the forehead with it. Didn't think about kick. Yeah, oh, man. But, like, that's a grenade launcher, one-handed.
It is a bit insane to have someone go, I'm going to shoot this grenade launcher at you 12 times. Full auto, 200 rounds per minute. And you're like, what do you mean you're going to shoot a grenade launcher at me at 200 rounds per minute? And I feel like that's kind of the whole part of this fight. I do think the Terrans the fight gets better if you extend this fight off to a much larger fight.
That's fair.
I do think that if you were to extend this to like a kind of like a Space Marine company versus like a Terran force, I think you get a better result. And I do think that the more you up the Marines, you can get better results for this fight, and it becomes more interesting to really discuss who might be able to take the fight overall. But in a fight, even in a 5v5, and this is part of the reason why we didn't want to do a 1v1, is in a 1v1, I don't see this being a fight, period.
I agree.
They're just going, hey, we're both going at it.
A 5v5 is almost perfect. A 3v3 is kind of okay. 4v4 is a little bit better. Yeah, I feel like the 5 to like 7 area is just, it adds just enough chaos to where like, I don't know, it just makes it more chaotic. It gives you more variables.
Yeah, it gives you enough space for you to go, well, in some cases, the Terran Marines might get a effective flank off in the early part of the fight. They'll pin the Space Marine down. They might take one out. And then the other exchanges, now they have the numbers advantage. They might get a few more. And 20% of the time, they might eliminate all the Marines with heavy losses, like 5 of them die and all the Marines are gone. Or 4 of them die and all the Marines are gone. Or 3 of them die and all the Marines are gone.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, in 1v1, that's such a boring idea, and literally just whoever sees the other one first pretty much wins.
Yeah. It's pretty much, hey, who sees the other one first? And that's part of the reason why a 1v1, so first, a 1v1 versus each other would come down to, okay, who has the better sensors? Well, we can't really quantify that exactly. But then the moment you go, well, one of them, even if they don't have, like, visual sensors, can sniff someone out. And I mean, take a bloodhound. A bloodhound can smell you from very, very far away, especially if you're upwind. And then you've got a completely different. One's gonna see the other one much, much earlier, and it's not gonna have a hard time getting to them at 40, 50 miles, 60 miles per hour at a run. I think that's kind of it. Space Marine wins 8-2.
I can go with 8-2. I was about to say 9-1, but no, I think 8-2 is actually better.
Yeah, so there is enough chaos in this where I feel like there's enough variation that the Terrans can get a couple of wins. Just because the C-14 is they're basically walking around as like a heavy weapons squad.
Yeah, like.
And if you were to compare that to like Halo's weapons, like the battle rifle or anything like that, this would be a much different discussion because they have no punching power to kill the Space Marine. But the Terran Marines, even though they're not as enhanced as I would say the Terran Marines have the opposite issue of the Spartans, where the Spartans are similar physicality, similar training, not as long. But similar physicality, similar physical abilities, and so on, but their weapons are sort of poor. The Terran Marines have much better weapons, but struggle from not having the physicality to match up.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we covered everything, so if you're no longer listening, we want to cover a couple things, but if you are, cool. Make sure to check us out on our social media at Epic Encounters Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Anywhere else, I think that we have, I guess. I don't have much to say on any kind of shilling. See, we're not going to beg for money at the moment because we don't have the Patreon set up yet. We'll do that later.
We have an inability to beg currently.
Yeah, so we have an inability.
It's not that we don't want to.
It's not that we don't want to shill out, but as all content creators must, But we're chilling right now. And tune in later this week for an episode where we kind of go over and discuss Jujutsu Kaisen and its power system and kind of talk about a lot of the power systems from some other animes and what we like about them. With that being said, we'll see you next time for the next epic encounter. Bye, guys.
Peace.